right, it looks like we have our participants kind of remaining the same here. So I am just going to get right into it. And once again, welcome to everyone. We're really excited to have you on for tonight's webinar. An extremely important topic, especially as some of you out there have started school. There are some other people who are probably getting started within the next couple of weeks. If you are going into your senior year, this is something that's going to be very prevalent. If you're someone who is a junior or possibly even younger, this is something that you are going to have to be very concerned about once you get to that fall season of your senior year. But we also are going to be talking about some things that you can do prior to your senior year to make sure you are on track to apply for colleges as well. For those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Mike. I'm a senior recruiting analyst here at SportsRecruits, and that really means that I'm working with anyone who is looking for additional support in the recruiting process. That could include anyone who is looking for highlight video assistance, email assistance, and also because of my background as being a former admissions counselor, I also do help out the families that I work with the college application process, helping them with different aspects of financial aid and things of that nature. So I'm really excited to walk everyone through some of the most important aspects of the college admissions process for our users here tonight. Remember, keep in mind, if anyone does have any questions, we do give you the ability to utilize the chat box or the Q&A section. Since I'm going to be hosting this alone tonight, I might not have an opportunity to see your question until the end, but we always do leave time for some questions towards the end of this presentation. So feel free to write those in as they come in, but hopefully I'll be able to answer a lot of them as you're considering them on your end as well. In terms of the different topics that we will be going over tonight, we'll first talk about what you should be doing before applying to a school. So again, particularly for people who may not necessarily be in senior year as of right now, this is something that's going to be very helpful for you. Next up, we're going to talk about what to do, mostly what the college application is, the different types of applications you can expect, what's going to be required when you start filling that information out. Once we get through that, we'll talk about different scholarships that are available to you as a prospective student athlete. Then we'll go into the financial aid side of things, how those two things differentiate, what you need to do, preferably right around October 1st to make sure you get the most out of your need-based aid. And again, like I said, towards the end, we always leave time for a Q&A portion. So if anyone wants to use the chat box or the Q&A box, feel free to utilize that. And I'll do my best to get to as many questions as I can once we get towards the end of tonight's meeting. But again, let's get right into it. What to do before applying to a school. First and foremost, I think one of the best things you can do, particularly when you are an underclassman, if you're a freshman in high school, a sophomore in high school, getting on the radar of student athletes, of college coaches and college programs is a great starting point. So you want to make sure that you're filling out recruiting questionnaires, either that you can find yourself, or if you are sending out emails to college programs, do your best to try and fill out those questionnaires that they're sending over to you. This is an especially really helpful thing for you to do because that's going to get you put into the database of those different college programs. So whenever they have announcements moving forward, whether it be about prospect camps they're hosting, updates to the facilities, open house opportunities that's going to give you a chance to visit, those are all great things that you're going to be able to stay up to date on as soon as those announcements are being made. So I understand it's not the most exciting part of the recruiting process, but whenever you have those recruiting questionnaires sent over to you, we highly recommend that you get those filled out as soon as you can. For those of you who are interested in competing at the Division I or the Division II level, one thing that will be required is something known as the NCAA eligibility number. At this point in time, for U.S. citizens to receive this number, I believe the rate is about $100 for you to sign in and receive that ID number. And essentially, for those of you who aren't aware of what that is, that's going to give you the ability to actually register with the NCAA if you end up competing at the D1 or D2 level. It's going to ask you to submit course information to make sure that you are going to be academically eligible by the time that you become a college freshman. So again, if you're looking at the D3 route, if you're looking at the NAIA or JUCO route, this isn't something that you necessarily would have to complete, but keep in mind if you do have D1 or D2 aspirations, an eligibility number would be required. You also want to make sure that you're sending college coaches any academic updates that you have. This could be your most recent transcript. This can be any academic progress outside of that, such as SAT scores or ACT scores. Maybe you have athletic updates, like you want to give an update about what your most recent season was like, or statistics or metrics or hitting PRs in the weight room. Anything that's going to give them additional context on where exactly you are as a student athlete, that's going to be a benefit to the evaluation for those college coaches. We briefly mentioned the test scores. That's something we're going to talk about more at length as we kind of move forward with this presentation as well. We are in a situation now where there are a lot of schools that have decided to go the test optional route. So we'll talk about the differences within that, and if it is something that still is going to be worth it for you to take those exams by the time you become a senior or not. And also something that we're also really big advocates of is giving yourself a chance to see the college programs on your list. It's something that's going to be specifically helpful for you to do, because you're not really going to know for sure if a school is a good fit or not until you've had a chance to walk around and put yourself in those shoes and see for yourself. So if you're not getting invited by the coaching staff, you can also set up your own campus tour. Again, if you're signing up for prospect camps, that's a great opportunity to basically kill two birds with one stone. What I mean by that is it gives you a chance to actually be seen by the college coaches if you sign up for the camp, and you can potentially have a campus tour also built into that. Sometimes the schools do it themselves, or you might be able to even just register for an additional tour while you're going to be there as well. And finally, for those of you who have access to the Sports Recruits profile, and I imagine that's most of the people who are here on this meeting here tonight, getting all of this information up to date on there is going to be the best way to keep those coaches in the know of everything that you have going on. So that includes videos, that includes your academic information, that includes your statistics and metrics like I was referring to before. These are great things, to get put in front of these college coaches by sending emails, by, if you're in a situation where you're talking to coaches through phone calls or texting, feel free to do that as well. But you also want to make sure if there are any coaches out there who are looking to add talent to their roster, having a Sports Recruits profile filled out with all of that necessary information is going to be a great way to make sure you're maximizing the most out of that as well. Excuse me. While I go into the next slide, I do see there was another question that came in. Does the NCAA number, is that needed for Canadians? The answer to that is yes. If you are interested in particularly competing at the D1 and D2 level, I believe it is a little bit of a higher fee, potentially around $120 per se. But if you just type in an NCAA eligibility number on Google, you'll be able to see it, and you could actually type it in specifically for international applicants as well. But that's definitely a great question too. All right, next thing we are going to discuss here a little bit further is the college application. And before we get into what exactly is included in applications, I think it's important for us to talk about the different types of applications you might find yourself filling out here in the next couple of months, particularly for those who are in their senior year as of right now. So most likely, the first two are going to be the types of applications that a majority of the people on this meeting are going to be filling out, and that's going to be the individual application, which essentially means when you go onto a school's website, when you go to Malloy.edu or Michigan.edu, the individual application is going to be something where you can just fill out directly online through that school's website. The Common App, however, is a little bit different, where it's going to give you a chance to actually fill out one application for a multiple of schools. I believe the exact number is over 600 or 700 colleges at this point have listed in the Common App. So there might be certain things that you need to do for particular programs, like certain writing responses or certain pieces of information of that application that you need to do specifically. But the Common App is a great way, if a majority of your list is on the Common App, you are going to be able to get multiple applications filled out. So a lot of that, a lot of the things like your name, your direct contact information, your parents' information, you will only have to fill out that info once if the majority of the schools that you're looking to apply to are going to be on the Common App. The universal application is something that's pretty well known in the circles of a lot of high academic schools. Cornell, Harvard, Princeton, Duke, Rice, I believe is another one, just to name a couple. This is just another way where, again, if you are applying to multiple colleges, it's just going to be one central place where you can get multiple applications filled out on the same website. Then there's also, in particular states throughout the US, there's also different applications that you might be able to fill out if you are applying to schools that are within the same governing body. So me being from New York, I had the opportunity to fill out something known as the SUNY application, meaning any state universities of New York, it would be one central place where you can go in and you can find any of the schools within that governing body to fill out that application. Apply Texas is something very similar in that particular state, and there are a few others out there as well. But again, keep this in mind that there's are going to be a couple of different places where you can find these applications. A lot of times if people are on the Common App, they might have their own individual application as well. So just do your best to do your research, try and find out if you have that list of schools that you're applying to. For some people that might be 3 schools, for some people that might be 7 or 8 or even more. Try and find out where a majority of those applications are going to be able to be found. So that way you can kind of make, you can make the redundancy of typing out and filling out applications the least amount of work as possible if you're going to be able to get that information filled out mostly in one place. Some different required materials that you guys are going to be able to submit as you're getting ready for these applications. Of course, getting the application completed in full is going to be a huge part of that. And also, a majority of schools are going to ask you to submit official transcripts when you are applying to their programs. In the beginning, some schools will be okay with you sending unofficial transcripts, but at some point before you step foot on that campus to be considered a full-time freshman, you will need to send a final transcript of all of your courses that you've taken throughout your high school career. Something that's changed pretty significantly over the last few years is the overall benefit of the SAT and the ACT exam. Now, at this point in time, a lot of schools have gone to go the test optional route, meaning you don't necessarily need to have an SAT or an ACT score to be considered for your application to be reviewed by that particular school. But the one thing that I would note about that, and this is something we'll talk about in the next slide as well, is that it could be worth just taking the exam, because even if you take it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to send those scores over to all of the schools that you're applying to. So if you're someone who wants to just take a shot and see how you did, there's really no harm or no risk in taking the exam, because you don't have to send anything out that you wouldn't want to. There also is going to be a situation where some schools will, if they are at least giving you the opportunity to look at your SAT exam or ACT exam, they'll also give you a chance to do something called super scoring, which means if you take the exam more than once, for the SAT, for example, you can get your best reading exam result and your best math exam result. You can combine those two scores together. So even though it was on two separate test dates, you're still going to be evaluated based on the maximum score that you've put together. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, we'll go over on the next slide some of the different types of how different colleges are going to be looking at the SAT and ACT moving forward here. And again, since COVID, that's really been something that's been drastically changed over the years. A college essay is something that's going to be typically required by every single school out there. In terms of the different prompts that you could expect, a lot of schools that are on the Common App are going to give you usually a variation of a couple of different things that you can include. It could be something as simple as, tell us about someone who is a hero of yours. Tell us about a time that you came back from adversity. Something that's not going to be very detailed, but is going to give you the ability to really showcase your writing style, say something personal about yourself, and really it's really going to be the one chance that you have when filling out an application to have some individuality. Of course, your grades are going to play a factor. In some instances, your test scores are going to play a factor. This is really going to be the one chance for you to showcase what type of person you are. You may want to mention what you've kind of gone through in athletics during that essay as well. And I would say a lot of the times, and a lot of the athletes that I've worked with, typically during your senior year, your English course during that first couple of months of school will be focusing on making sure that you are going to be in a position to fill out some sort of college essay. So if you're not receiving that assistance right now, maybe just reach out to someone that within your school who would be able to help you with a prompt that you're not sure of how to kind of utilize. And also keep in mind that there might be more than one essay required at some of these programs as well. Supplemental materials could be considered a requirement at some places, or it's something that you can include on your own. One of the most popular supplemental materials that we would typically see when I was an admissions counselor was a letter of recommendation. Certain schools, certain high schools would require certain students to maybe have at least 2 to 3 recommendations when they are sending out their applications. This could be in your core courses, your math, your sciences, your history, and your English courses. Or it could be something where if you are someone who has more of like an art focus or a business focus, that might be one of what the teacher that you decide to also fill out a recommendation letter for yourself as well. This is just a great way, again, just to kind of showcase that individuality, give someone an opportunity to speak on your behalf, to let them know that they think that you would be a great introduction and a great person to bring into that program and into that campus. And you would be someone who would leave it a better place than it was before you got there. Some people receive different certificates or awards or honors or accolades, whether it be athletically focused or also academically focused. And obviously that's going to be a great thing to include as well. We talked about additional writing samples that could be included. Supplemental essays are kind of in the same world there. And then one thing in particular that I experienced when I was working at Molloy College was we actually gave student athletes an opportunity to earn scholarship money based on community service that they were involved in. So we would typically ask any student who's planning on applying to Molloy College, this isn't something that was only available to student athletes, to see if there was anything in particular that they wanted to let us know about in terms of how many hours they dedicated, what organizations that they've donated their time to. They could really take that essay whichever way they wanted. Typically, it was about 1 to 3 pages, but some students got up to $5,000 of scholarship money solely based on that essay per year, based on the essay that they put together. So that means that some students got $20,000 off of their tuition over the course of 4 years, solely because they took the time to write a 2 to 3 page essay. Again, this is something that I cannot guarantee that every school you're going to apply to, or those who are in here tonight, that that's going to be something similar that's going to be offered at other places. But overall, college admissions offices, they typically want to see people who are going to be involved, and they don't want to, and they typically would prefer to accept someone who's going to do more than just go to class and go back to their dorm, or just go to practice and go back to their dorm. Getting involved in the community, being involved in clubs, doing extracurriculars is something that is going to be looked at as you are going through this application process. So if you are someone who is in 10th grade or 11th grade and you haven't really done a whole lot outside of athletics, up to this point, you still have time to add a couple of extracurriculars, and I would highly recommend that you do so. The one thing I will also note about the SAT and ACT exams, I didn't catch this before, but keep in mind that more than 80% at this point, thanks to collegeadvisor.com for providing us this information, more than 80% of four-year colleges did not require an ACT or SAT for fall 2023 admissions. We can expect a lot, incoming for this year as well. In terms of the different standardized testing options, we'll go through some of the different ways that you can see. Of course, there are going to be some schools that do require the SAT or ACT, but we're focusing on the schools that may not require it in some way. So test-free is something that isn't as popular. Only less than 100 schools offer this as an option currently, but it essentially means that even if you submit your SAT or ACT score to these particular programs, they're still not going to consider it as part of your application in a reason of why they accept you or not accept you. So it's also known as being test blind. And again, those test scores still could be used for class placements, meaning maybe a certain math class that you might be taking or a certain English course that you might be put into. But in terms of actually deciding if you are accepted or not, your ACT or SAT would not be considered as part of that. The most typical type of SAT and ACT consideration that we see in the world today is a test optional school, meaning that they are not required as part of your application, but if you do send it, it will be considered. So again, this is for those people who aren't sure if they want to take the SAT or the ACT. This is where I would recommend to at least take it, because if you end up getting a score that you're not super satisfied with, you're going to be in complete control of what schools are going to have the ability to see that. For example, an SAT of a 1250 might be a score that you want to send to one of the schools on your list, but it might not be something that you might want to include in one of the other places. So that's just something to keep in mind, that a majority of the schools that a lot of you here are going to be applying to in the coming weeks, in the coming months, are typically going to be give you the opportunity to go for the test optional route. And lastly, again, something that we don't see as often, I believe NYU is one of the schools that we've seen this in. A test flexible school means that some test scores will be required, but you can choose through a list of which ones that you can submit. So maybe you don't have the SAT or the ACT exam filled out, but you might have some AP courses that you've taken, or an IB exam that you've taken in your time since you've earned those college credits. That can be utilized in place of an SAT or an ACT as well. Just looking at some of these questions that are coming in, and I see there are a few in here, and I'll make sure again, for those who didn't hear me at the beginning of this meeting, if you wrote in the question, just be patient. I'll be sure to get to as many questions as possible before the end of tonight's presentation. Last up, in terms of other things that people need to know about the application, another thing that I want to talk about is the different type of deadlines that we want to consider. One thing that I recommend to every single student athlete that I work with is whenever you're in a spot where it's a school that you've been in consideration with, it's a school that you're not quite sure what they think of you as a potential student athlete, the answer to try and get that interest to significantly increase is to get an application filled out early, because that's going to show that coaching staff and that admissions department that you are very serious and that you are very interested in competing for that team and also attending that school. One way that you can fill out an application to receive an earlier response time is something known as an early action application. Typically, you would get a response by the time of like November 1st. The early action deadline could be sometimes in October or in November, but regardless, you're going to get a faster response time when you decide to go that early action route, since that deadline is going to be earlier for when they expect it. An early decision application is going to be a little different in the standpoint of, if you get accepted to that school when you apply early decision, that means that you are you are legally binded to attend that school if you are accepted to the program. So only apply to a school with an early decision application if it is your number one choice and you are willing to do whatever it takes to get into that particular school. If you are not in that situation, or if you have another school that you're kind of on the fence about, definitely make sure you take your time with this. Talk to your guidance counselors on which schools may be worth filling out an application for ED1 or ED2. For those who aren't aware, Early decision 1, it's just going to have an earlier application deadline where ED2 is going to have something to give you a little bit more time, typically around the first couple of weeks of January. But keep in mind, early decision, it's a binding contract where if you are accepted to that school, you are legally obligated to attend that particular program. Rolling admissions, which is what the school that I was working at was for a majority of its program, there was no set deadline, and students are accepted until programs have been filled. Now, that means some programs that don't get a ton of applicants means that you could probably apply to the school as late as, as late as the summer going into your freshman year. But there might be other programs that are really popular on campus where it still makes sense to apply early if there is no set deadline, because there's only a certain amount of seats that they can accept students to come into that particular program. So again, the school that I worked at was Malloy College in Rockville Center, New York. They have one of the best nursing programs in the state of New York. So it was very important for anyone who was interested in becoming a nursing major at Malloy College to get their application in early. So then they would have a quicker opportunity to send that tuition deposit, which secures their seat in that particular program. And finally, a regular decision. Usually there's an application due date around January or February, and students would typically receive a decision by March or April. So these are the different types of application deadlines that you guys can expect to see as you are preparing to get your applications filled out. Some of you may have already filled out some of these applications, but keep in mind, these are the different things different types of buzzwords and different types of definitions that you should keep in mind as you are getting ready to fill out those applications. In terms of different responses, of course, accepted, congrats. That means that you did it. You're getting into the school. Typically in an acceptance letter, the school will let you know if you are going to be receiving any sort of additional aid, or if they don't have that answer yet, they'll give you a heads up on it whenever they have the access to that info a little bit more down the road. A deferment means that the college has not made a decision on if you are accepted or not, and they might request some more information such as new transcripts or an updated test score, just to get a better idea of if you are someone who would be a good fit for that particular school. How a deferred application is different from a waitlisted application means that your application is on hold when you're waitlisted, meaning that even if you send some sort of update that might not make an impact on you receiving an acceptance or not, it might just be more about how many of those accepted students have decided to attend that particular school. And that's how they're going to end up making that decision if you're going to end up being accepted or maybe getting a different type of response for that particular application. And I know we've kind of explained this in depth, but it is extremely important. Again, keep in mind that an early decision acceptance is a binding contract, and early action acceptance is not a binding contract. So the due dates for those applications may be a little bit earlier, but understand that they're two very different things in terms of how it would work when you are going through the application process. Okay, next thing we are going to go through here, everyone. And again, I see the questions are continuing to come in here, and I really appreciate it. So we are going to talk about the different types of scholarships that are available to you as well. So the most typical scholarship that a lot of students will receive is going to be based on your academics. They're known as merit scholarships, and typically it's just a sliding course where they look at your overall GPA, they read your essay, they look at your extracurriculars, they look at your application holistically. And then there's other schools that will just look at the numbers. They look at your test grades, they look at your GPA, and they're going to give you some sort of academic scholarship based on that. The overall range could be found on these different schools' websites in terms of what type you can expect. And one thing that student athletes in particular will sometimes get a heads up about, if you are someone who these coaches are very interested in, they typically will ask you for your access to your transcripts maybe by the end of your junior year, maybe mid-junior year, to try and get an idea of what type of merit scholarship may be available to you. That's something known as an academic pre-read. So if a coach is typically asking you for access to your courses and to your grades a little bit earlier on, that usually is a pretty good indicator that an offer may be coming at some point down the road, specifically if they are calling it an academic pre-read. In terms of the different athletic scholarships that are available, keep in mind from the NCAA, Division I and Division II programs do offer athletic scholarships. Division III does not. And junior colleges and NAIA programs also offer scholarships from the athletic standpoint as well. So if you are a Division III potential athlete, keep in mind if you are getting looked at, any scholarships that you would receive would not be athletically based. They might be merit-based or from some of these different scholarships and grants that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes here. A head count sport is typically when you're a scholarship athlete where a maximum number of players can receive scholarships, or an equivalency sport, which is what a majority of the different colleges, different programs out there are going to be considered for, means that those different scholarships can be divided up to the athletes on the team. For those of you who have never visited the site scholarshipstats.com, that is a great place to go if you are trying to get a better understanding of how many scholarships are available and what types of scholarships are available for the sport that you are particularly competing in. That's going to give you a better understanding of what percentage of high school athletes are awarded athletic scholarships. The number that you see at the bottom of the screen here shows you that only 2% of high school athletes are awarded athletic specific scholarships to compete in college. So keep in mind, if that's what you're banking on, there's a very small portion of the population who end up playing collegiate sports to receive some sort of athletic-based scholarship. But make sure you take a time to go into scholarshipstats.com to take a look and see all the different types of numbers that are available there to give you a better understanding of really how competitive it is to try and be considered for some of these different scholarships available from the athletic standpoint. And lastly, internal scholarships are different grants or different scholarships that could be available based on the major that you're applying to, the community service like I was referring to before, something that the college is also offering as an additional way to get that tuition number down. But then for those of you who are also looking to earn some more scholarship money, maybe not necessarily through the schools that you're applying to, there are some great websites online that I would highly recommend you check out. Fastweb.com, niche.com are some great places where you can fill out some additional information. They can give you an idea on what types of scholarships that you might be able to qualify for. Some of these might be for $500 for you, filling out a quick form. Others might be $1,000 or $5,000 if you're willing to fill out an essay. So I would recommend, if you haven't already created an account on Fastweb, I would recommend that you create the account today, and they can start pairing you up with potential scholarships that could help with paying for the college experience at some point down the road. Just to do a quick additional background on the difference between headcount sports and scholarship sports. Again, the headcount sport typically means that if you're receiving an athletic-based scholarship, that means that you're most likely going to be getting a full ride, meaning that they're going to take care of all of your tuition for that particular academic year. So you'll see that in Division I football, particularly at the FBS level, Division I basketball, Division I women's tennis, Division I women's gymnastics, and Division I women's volleyball. All other programs are considered equivalency sports, meaning that typically there's going to be an overall amount of scholarship money available that then gets divvied up across the roster, however the coach sees fit. Some people might get a 50% athletic scholarship. Some people get a 25% athletic scholarship. That's something that's going to be determined by the coach directly for any of those equivalency sports. And also, last thing there, again, keep in mind, Division III programs, they do not offer scholarships from the athletic standpoint, but there are other forms of aid that they can focus on to keep them as competitive with some of those D2 and D1 programs that those coaches and those programs might be reaching out to. So again, there's a lot of different ways to earn scholarship money. Just understand what exactly you are eligible for based on what schools you're looking at and what sport that you play. And again, scholarshipstats.com is a great place to get some additional information on that. And last up, before we get to the Q&A portion here, we're just going to quickly talk about financial aid. For those of you who are in senior year right now, we are just about 6 weeks or so away from the FAFSA application opening up for those of you in the class of 2023. So do this early, or class of 2024, I should say. Do this as early as possible and make sure, even if you don't think that you're eligible for any need-based aid, still fill out the FAFSA form. The first thing that you're going to want to do is create an FSA ID. For the parents who are on this call, make sure you create your own ID as well, especially if your student is going to be considered a dependent of you and you are going to be helping with the financing of college. Having some information available, such as your social security number, driver's license, W-2s, and tax records, are going to be what those schools are going to need to take a look at to make a determination on what type of aid that you are not going to be responsible paying for based on need-based overall aid. Again, you want to make sure that you create that login as soon as possible. And then once October 1st comes around, that is when you can start getting that information submitted to the schools that you are planning on applying to. It is not required to fill out the application first to put a school on your FAFSA account. So I believe at this point in time, I believe you have up to 10 schools that you can add to that particular list. So if you are looking to apply to schools this fall, make sure any school that you plan on applying to, if it's within 10 schools, you add them to your FAFSA form. That way you can automatically be considered once your application goes through for some type of need-based aid. A lot of these colleges out there also offer some sort of net price calculator that's going to give you a better understanding of, based on some of this information I referred to before, what type of aid you can expect if you do eventually apply to that particular school. And there also will be certain instances similar to the academic pre-read that I was considering before, that I was explaining when you were talking about different scholarships that might be available on the academic side of things. There also is an opportunity at some programs and some schools to receive a financial pre-read as well. So another thing to keep in mind as well is that there was some news that came out recently that there will be a new FAFSA form coming out in 2024, which is going to launch in December of this year, which is going to end up being a significantly simplified version of what the FAFSA form in the FAFSA application is now. I believe it's over 100 questions currently. It's going to end up going down to about 36 questions or so at this point in time. You'll be able to find a lot of great resources on that. But for those of you who are applying to school for the first time this year, that new FAFSA form will not be available until December of this year, and it's going to be specifically for those people who are starting to apply to schools next year. So just keep that in mind and keep that in the back of your head, because FAFSA is something that you have to do year in and year out while you are in college. Okay, everyone, I know that was a lot of information, and thank you so much for bearing with me as we went through all of that. But hopefully a lot of you in here feel a lot more confident about what you need to do prior to starting the application process, what the application process is, the different types of applications, the different types of responses you can receive from these different colleges, and a number of other things that we covered. But like I said, we have about 5-ish minutes, 10-ish minutes or so to look through as many of these questions that you guys provided so far. So let me go through and do my best to answer these quickly for you all. Okay. So one of the questions I see populate here: what year or grade should students begin to apply to colleges? Keep in mind, you're only allowed to actually apply to the different colleges that you're interested in during your senior year. So even if you're going into your junior year right now, you can't fill out an application early. It's something that you are going to have to start typically that summer going into senior year, or even if you're in a situation where you started school now, there are some schools out there that already are accepting applications. So once you get into that senior year is really when you're going to want to start filling out applications for sure. Let's see. This is a really good question. And this is going to be something that I think is going to lead to possibly some more questions as well. Is it a bad idea to tell more than one coach that you plan to apply early decision? This is something that's very difficult to include, because if you can, again, keep in mind that early decision application is going to be binding. So if you are accepted, you are going to be legally obligated to go to that particular program. So my recommendation would be to only fill out for one particular school, but I would recommend having more of a distinct conversation with someone that you trust within your school, like a guidance counselor or a teacher, or someone who has a bit more additional information on kind of what type of student that you are. Maybe there is a situation where maybe applying ED to more than one school would be worth it in your particular situation. But without knowing more details, I would not advise that. I would recommend picking the number one surefire. This is my dream school. I'm willing to do whatever I can to get accepted to that particular school. That would be the one that I would reserve that early decision application for. Great question, though. Let's see. Looks like we have they keep coming in. And again, thank you guys so much. I know this is a very popular topic, so I really want to make sure that I get to as many of these as I possibly can with the time I have remaining. Let's see. Are Division I and Division II scholarships divided out per team or between each class of students, whether it be freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors? So yeah, so that's a good question. So it really is, there's going to be an overall pool that the amount of scholarships that that particular team can provide across all of the different graduating classes. So in some instances, there might be certain programs that only have a certain amount of scholarships because a lot of their upperclassmen are scholarship students, where the vice versa is also available as well, where they might have more money for a particular freshman class because they had a lot of graduating seniors, which opened up more of a potential for more people to receive some scholarship money. So kind of works out both ways in that sense. But yeah, it's good. The way the coaches are going to be looked at by those governing bodies is going to be the overall amount of scholarships that they have across the program rather than across each particular graduating class. Let's see. All right. Couple more here, guys. There's a couple of repeats in here, so I'm doing my best just to get to the ones that we haven't answered just yet. Let's see. Do you need to register for an NCAA eligibility number in order to get recruited by a Division I school, or can you wait to apply for one after you know if a Division I school is interested in you? Really great question. Now, it's something that isn't technically required to do prior to, prior to being recruited by a particular program. But I would recommend, and an NCAA also recommends, that you fill out the NCAA eligibility number information prior to or the end of your sophomore, start of your junior year is really that time frame where you should start that process overall. If you're not sure if you are going to be a potential Division I or Division II student athlete, I would recommend reaching out to one of your coaches, one of your athletic advocates, as we call it, so they can give you a better idea of what you're kind of targeting or what you should target moving forward. I think that's a great way. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's foolproof, and you're going to definitely end up at a Division I, Division II school if you fill out that number ahead of time. But it is, from my experience and from working with other student athletes, I've been told that just having that information filled out ahead of time in advance just ends up making the process go a lot smoother. We had someone also write in saying that they weren't able to hear within the first 10 minutes. Keep in mind, by signing up for this webinar, all of you are automatically going to receive a recording of this webinar at some point tomorrow as well. So if you miss something for a second, if you have to step away from your computer, you're going to have full access to this as soon as we make it available as well. Let's see. Someone reached out. This is also a very good question. With the multiple application submissions, such as a Common App, do you pay one fee for multiple schools, or do you need to pay an application fee for each school you wish to apply to within the app? It's the latter. So even though all of the information is going to be listed in one place, you still will be responsible to fill out the application fee for each individual school. There are certain schools out there that will sometimes waive the application fee in certain instances, and that's something you can definitely go on their websites to see how exactly you can qualify for that. But particularly with the Common App, even though it's a lot of the same information that you don't have to repeat multiple times, you still would be required to get the application fee filled out for multiple schools if you are applying to multiple schools there. Really good question. Someone just asked about the recording. We just mentioned that. I'm just going to get through that one too. Email out this video. Yes, we are. Let's see. Are these dates for junior or senior year? I would imagine that that's probably for the FAFSA when we were in that particular area of the presentation. So yes, so October 1st is a date where the FAFSA application opens up for the current senior class, meaning for those of you who are in junior year as it stands right now, you would go through the FAFSA application process as close to October 1st of next year as humanly possible, if you want to put yourself in the position to be considered for the most amount of aid possible. How early should you share your academic transcript with college coaches? This particular person is starting their junior year right now. That's something that's very subjective, and it's also very dependent on how you're doing academically so far as well. If you're someone who has straight A's and you want to give those coaches a heads up that, you know, where you are academically isn't going to be an issue if you do plan on applying to that particular school, I think during junior year, at the end of your sophomore year is totally an acceptable time to start sending out that academic information. If you're in a position where, you're at the end of your sophomore year and you feel like you could have done a little bit better, or you just weren't exactly in the right headspace and you want to prove to these coaches that you are a better student than what the GPA, clarifies right now, I think in that particular instance, it's okay to wait until maybe mid-year of junior year before you start sending out that information. If a coach does ask for the transcript, though, there's really nothing you can do about it. It's better just to get that information out in the open and upfront, and then they can give you an idea of like, okay, it might not be exactly what we're looking for right now, but at least you have time to catch up and get to that GPA that they need to get you to, or whatever it is that they need to make you more of a viable applicant. Having that conversation a little bit earlier could be helpful. But I would say, if you're in a spot where you are doing well academically, end of sophomore year is a great time to at least introducing yourself with some of that academic information for sure. All right, guys, looks like I have time for about one or two more questions here. And again, thank you all so much for reaching out. This is really helpful to see the types of things you are looking for additional information on. Okay. Again, a couple of repeats here, so just want to make sure I answer one more question. The time that we have left. Okay, the last one that we'll go through here, this is something that we also cover on some other webinar topics that we do as well. What kind of communication do you recommend students give to schools they aren't interested in? So if you're in a position where a coach reaches out to you and you're at just a place that you're really confident, you're 99%, 100% confident this isn't going to be the best place for you, it's totally okay to be upfront and open about that, but make sure that you are being respectful in doing so as well. I think the way that you can frame that is, hey, coach, thank you so much for your interest in me as a potential student athlete. I really appreciate your interest. But at this time, after speaking it over with my family, I'm most likely going to go a different direction, as I don't believe this school has everything I'm looking for that I want to get through the college experience. Maybe they don't have the major that you're focused on. Maybe the location isn't right. Whatever it is, you don't need to get too specific about it. But I think as long as you let them know in advance, hey, look, I just don't see this happening, but I'll let you know if anything changes, is something that coaches totally understand. The same way when they have to tell potential recruits that they're not going to be able to move forward in the recruiting process with them, they understand that that happens on the student athlete side as well. So this was great, guys. Again, thank you so much for all of the questions that popped in here. One thing that I'll do really quickly before we wrap up is I'm just going to hop in and see if I can find some different resources that I'm going to put in the chat box for everybody here. I see some people are asking questions about FAFSA and things of that nature, and also the NCAA eligibility number. So if you go into the Zoom chat box right now, I'm going to send to everyone a couple of different links. You'll see a link that I just sent in there, which is how to apply and how to fill out the FAFSA form. The next thing I'm going to put in here is going to be the website that I referred to earlier in this presentation called scholarshipstats.com. That's going to be able to give you more of a better understanding of the different types of things that are available in terms of how many scholarships are available by division and things of that nature. And the last one I'll pop in here, because I did see someone ask about the NCAA eligibility number. I'm going to send a help article that someone on our team filled out a little while back, and we update it consistently with an explanation of what the NCAA eligibility number is, where you can go to get that information, where you can go to receive that ID. So those 3 links are in the Zoom chat box right now. I'm going to turn this off in about 2 minutes. So if you want to save that information, just go in and try and click on those links right now. But again, thank you everyone so much for your time. I understand this is a very important topic. I want to wish everyone the best of luck who is planning on applying to schools this year. Maybe you've already started. The best of luck getting started with that process. It's stressful, but as long as you stay on top of things, you stay organized, it's something that you could do a really good job of making sure that you're going to maximize the potential of all the different things that you're available to do at the next level. We do these webinars typically 2 to 3 times per month. So if there's ever any particular topics or particular things that you guys want us to reach out and let you know about and give you more information about, reach out to help@sportsrecruits.com. And we're always looking for different topics and different ideas that you would like us to talk about. So again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you all reaching out and signing up for this presentation here today. And again, the webinar recording of this will be sent to you at some point tomorrow. So appreciate all of your time. We look forward to seeing you again in another webinar sometime soon. Have a great rest of your night, everybody. Thanks again.